Today we're going to look back at 12 hockey night snacks only true Canadians remember. Not arena food, not pub grub. These were the living room staples that filled coffee tables every Saturday night, while the Hockey Night in Canada theme echoed through the house. By the time the first whistle blew, every table in the country looked the same. Bowls, bottles, and napkins spread like a second lineup. Ripple chips with onion soup mix dip sat in the center of it all. One tub of sour cream, one packet of Lipton onion soup mix, and a bag of Old Dutch Ripples. That was the national recipe. The dip chilled in the fridge until it thickened, then appeared just before face-off. The Ridge chips held the salty dip perfectly, snapping at just the right pressure. Kids sat cross-legged on the floor, fathers leaned forward in their armchairs, and mothers kept refilling the bowl between periods. The sound of crunching blended with the commentary, a rhythm every household knew by heart. Cheesies added the chaos. The bright red and white bag was torn open long before the first goal. Hawkins made them in Belleville, Ontario, and somehow every piece tasted like Saturday night itself. Sharp, salty, impossible to stop eating. Orange fingerprints covered the couch, the remote, even the fridge handle. Dads paired them with cold Labatt 50s, kids washed them down with Pepsi, and no one cared that everything smelled faintly of cheese dust. Hawkins didn't need commercials. Every Canadian corner store already did the work. Popcorn brought the comfort. Before microwaves, you made it the old way. Kernels rattling in a pot, lid clattering as oil hissed. The first pops always hit just as the broadcast cut to the rink. Butter melted unevenly in a saucepan, poured until it looked right, never measured. Salt rained down heavy. Big metal mixing bowls sat on laps. The popcorn still warm, a few burnt pieces hidden at the bottom. Children tossed handfuls during goals, mothers scolded them, and the smell lingered long after the game ended. It wasn't just a snack, it was the scent of winter weekends across the country. Pickled eggs and sausages belonged to the adults. They waited in jars on basement bars, floating in vinegar beside half-empty beer bottles. Uncles fished them out with forks, sliced them on napkins, and argued about the Leafs' power play. The brine was sharp, the texture rubbery, the burn immediate. In small towns and coastal kitchens, families made their own, pouring hot vinegar over boiled eggs in reused glass jars that lasted all season. They weren't elegant, but they were dependable, cheap, salty, and perfect with another sip of beer. By the third period, the jar was half empty, and laughter drowned out the television. By intermission, the coffee table told its story. Crumbs, fingerprints, half-finished drinks, and bowls scraped nearly clean. Every snack was simple, affordable, and unmistakably ours. Hockey night wasn't just about the game. It was about that table, that room, that feeling of belonging that came with every crunch, sip, and cheer. Kraft Pizza Mix turned every kitchen into a pretend pizzeria long before delivery reached most neighborhoods. The Yellow Box sat in pantries across the country, holding a packet of flour, a tin of sauce, and instructions that no one really followed. Moms stirred the dough until it stuck to their fingers, pressed it onto baking sheets, and spread the thick, sweet sauce edge to edge. The smell filled the whole house as the oven warmed, the kind that made neighbors knock on the door asking what was cooking. Kids hovered close, arguing over toppings, even though there were rarely any beyond shredded cheddar and a few slices of pepperoni if payday had been kind. When it came out, the crust was uneven, the edges too crisp, and the middle soft. But that first bite was always perfect. No restaurant delivery could touch a homemade pizza that cost under $2 and disappeared before the second period began. By the time the oven timer dinged, someone was already cracking open a can of Vienna sausages. They came packed in brine, stacked like coins, and smelled faintly of tin. Mothers drained them, skewered them with colored toothpicks, and called it fancy. For kids, they were bite-sized curiosities. For dads, quick protein between beers. In small towns, they shared space with cubes of cheddar or slices of kielbasa on paper plates that sagged under the weight. Nobody cared about presentation. The can hit the trash, the toothpicks hit the coffee table, and the plate was empty before the commentators finished their first replay. Simple, salty, and exactly right. Ritz crackers and cheddar cubes were the glue of every snack spread. The red box promised something buttery and familiar, and it never lied. Mom stacked crackers into wobbly towers or spread them with Cheez Whiz when the cheese budget ran thin. They looked like hors d'oeuvres in a magazine, but everyone knew better. Fathers coming off late shifts grabbed handfuls straight from the platter, crumbs sticking to their sweaters. Kids paired theirs with a glass of orange pop and called it dinner. These were small acts of care disguised as convenience, proof that effort didn't need to be expensive to feel like love. Homemade nachos were the new kid on the coffee table by the mid-1980s. Old El Paso boxes started showing up in grocery aisles, promising Tex-Mex excitement Canadians couldn't yet pronounce. Families layered tortilla chips on a baking tray, sprinkled cheddar, spooned on jarred salsa, and slid the pan into the oven. The result was uneven. Some chips burned, others soggy, but no one complained. The smell of melted cheese filled the living room as the play-by-play rolled into the second period. Kids fought for the corner pieces stuck together in cheese armor, and the salsa always ran out too soon. By 1986, grocery reports showed salsa outselling ketchup in several cities, proof that even cautious households were ready to experiment if it meant one more reason to gather. By the third period, the table told a story of its own. Chip crumbs mixed with cheese strings, napkins soaked with fingerprints, and empty cans rolled under couches. Every snack had served its purpose. They weren't luxurious, but they were ours, made from what was available, shared with whoever dropped by. The game would end, but the crumbs stayed until morning, quiet proof that Saturday night had done its job. Pepsi bottles always made their way onto the table. The glass ones were the best, sweating cold onto coasters cut from old beer mats. You could hear the hiss of the cap twisting off just before the opening face-off. Some families were loyal to 7-Up, others to Orange Crush, but Pepsi felt like Canada's weekend drink. The bubbles hit your throat hard, sharper than today's plastic bottle version. Kids argued over who got the first pour, while mothers tried to stretch one bottle between 4 glasses. By the 1980s, 2-liter bottles had replaced the glass, but the ritual stayed the same. Soda meant it was Saturday night, and you could hear the fizz even over the commentary, and when the sugar rush hit, everyone knew what came next. By the second intermission, someone always appeared with a white Tim Hortons box, the scent of glaze spilling through the room. Inside were donuts and Timbits, old-fashioned plains, jelly-filled, chocolate-glazed, each one slightly stale by Sunday morning, but perfect that night. Families in smaller towns without a Tim's made do with bakery leftovers, sometimes saved in the freezer all week for game night. Kids went straight for the jelly, parents claimed the sour cream glazed, and every few minutes another hand reached into the box. By 1985, donut sales spiked every weekend across the country, quiet proof that hockey still set the rhythm of Canadian life. Sugar, coffee, and the sound of skates, that was the smell of the second intermission. By the final buzzer, the sweet always turned back to savory again. When the game ended, the post-game snacks took over. The coffee table became a leftovers buffet, half a pizza from earlier in the week, cold-cut sandwiches wrapped in wax paper, maybe a few pickled sausages still floating in their jar. Dad stacked sandwiches with mustard and leftover cheese slices, while kids claimed the cold pizza curling at the edges. The sign-off theme played softly as plates clinked and the last bottles were emptied. No one hurried. You lingered, talked about the game, and reached for whatever crumbs remained. Someone always said it. Next week, same place? By the time the lights dimmed, the table looked like every other coffee table in Canada. Scattered napkins, chip crumbs, empty bottles, and one or two cheesies stuck to the carpet. The game was over, but the feeling stayed. It wasn't about hockey anymore. It was about belonging, about the quiet pride of a country that could find joy in cheap snacks and shared moments. Across Canada, every living room told the same story: a bowl of chips, a can of soda, the glow of the TV, and the sound of home.